With the exponential growth in usage of mobile applications, the vulnerabilities associated with mobile apps have also increased. OWASP Mobile Top 10 is one such list that highlights the security flaws and vulnerabilities developers need to protect their applications from. On the face of it, mobile devices and apps may look secure since they are backed by established global brands. However, the reality is far less assuring. The mobile security company NowSecure tested 250 popular Android applications and found that around 70% of apps leaked sensitive personal data. In the same study, it revealed that 82% of retail stores and 92% of online retail apps tested leaked sensitive data. It also revealed that 67% of travel apps that help consumers visit places around the world were actively vulnerable. It also revealed that 8% of online retail apps were not at risk of exposing PII, so only 8%. And it also exposed that half of Android finance insurance apps leaked some form of sensitive personal data. This course is about iOS, but at the end of the day, we are talking about mobile applications. Android is much more vulnerable than iOS, but we need to know that the mobile industry these days and mobile applications are generally vulnerable. So what is OWASP? OWASP was founded in 2001. The Open Web Application Security Project is a community of developers that creates methodologies, documentation tools, and technologies in the field of web and mobile application security. Its top 10 lists, whether web or mobile, are constantly updated resources aimed at creating awareness about emerging security threats to mobile and web developers. So what is OWASP Mobile Top 10? Many of you are familiar with the regular or web OWASP Top 10, but we also have a mobile Top 10. So OWASP Mobile Top 10 is a list that identifies types of security risks faced by mobile applications. The list, which was last updated in 2016, is an acting guide for developers to build secure applications. The OWASP Mobile Top 10 risks are marked from M1 to M10. M1 is improper platform usage. So this risk covers the misuse of an operating system feature or a failure to use platform security controls properly. This may include platform permissions, keychains, or other security controls that are part of the platform. Its occurrence is really common with average detectability and can cause a severe impact on the affected application. So to give you more real examples, risks can include iOS keychain risks and iOS Touch ID risks. For example, the keychain is a secure storage facility, as you know, that allows a mobile user to create hard to remember passwords, which are more difficult to crack, thus making third-party accounts like banks and email accounts being accessed on mobile devices for extra security. iOS provides keychain encryption out of the box so that developers are not required to introduce their own encryption method. So if a user does not opt for keychain options, they may intuitively choose easy to remember password, which could be exploited by hackers. This is one example of improper platform usage. The other example is the iOS Touch ID risk. The iOS allows the Touch ID option to be used by developers for authenticating their mobile applications. Bypassing the Touch ID option makes the authentication process vulnerable to hacking attempts. The second vulnerability on the list, M2, is insecure data storage. This risk in the OWASP list informs the developer community about easy ways in which an adversary can access insecure data in a mobile device. An adversary can either gain physical access to a stolen device or enter it into using malware or repackaged application. The exploitation of unsecured data becomes possible due to developers' ignorance of how a device stores cached data, images, key presses, and buffers. Analysts have observed that a lack of proper technical documentation of these processes at the operating system and development framework allows developers to ignore these security processes. The best practices to avoid insecure data storage in iOS is to actually purposefully use vulnerable mobile applications such as iGo to threat model your application and development framework. This process allows developers to understand how APIs deal with the information assets and application processes like URL caching, key press caching, buffer caching, keychain usage, etc. So use vulnerable applications like Damn Vulnerable Mobile Application or iGo.iOS just to threat model your application development framework. The third vulnerability on the list is insecure communication, M3. Data transmission to and from a mobile app generally takes place through a telecom carrier and over the internet, of course. So hackers intercept data either as an adversary sitting in the local area network of users through compromised Wi-Fi network, man-in-the-middle attacks, or tapping into the networks using maybe routers or cellular towers or maybe proxy services. They can also exploit the infected application through a malware. The risks are stealing of information and performing many other man-in-the-middle attacks. While mobile developers are generally aware of using SSL certificates or TLS for authentication, they do not validate these certificates properly, leaving the scope of network attackers to man-in-the-middle attacks. You need to perform certificate pinning to identify the certificate before establishing a secure communication. This happens especially on like testing servers because certificates are domain specific and are not available on testing servers. The real danger of a man-in-the-middle attack is not when an adversary steals user data, but when insecure communication allows for data theft of the advanced accounts or the admin accounts. And this can lead to hacking of the entire website or entire mobile app with all the sensitive information. So the best practices to avoid insecure communication is to assume that the network layer is not secure and is susceptible to eavesdropping. You also need to watch out for leakage over the traffic communicated between the application and the server. Always apply SSL TLS to transport channels that the mobile application will use to transmit sensitive information, tokens, or other data to a backend API or web service. Also avoid mixed SSL sessions as they may expose the user's session ID. Use strong industry standard cipher to appropriately encrypt the traffic. Use certificates signed by trusted CA providers and not self-signed certificates. Establish a secure communication only after verifying the identity trusted certificates in the keychain. The fourth vulnerability, M4, is insecure authentication. This problem occurs when a mobile device fails to recognize the user correctly and allows an adversary to log into the application with a default credential. This typically happens when an attacker fakes or bypasses the authentication protocol, which are either missing or poorly implemented in the application. The insecure authentication risks are input form factor, which is a common source of manipulation in mobile devices, since application makers and mobile app platforms encourage easily accessible 4 or 6-digit passwords for ease of access. Apart from a weak input form factor, unreliable internet access on mobile devices forces developers to adopt an online approach to authenticate sessions. Another risk is insecure user credentials. A technical impact of insecure authentication is that when an app cannot determine the user credentials properly, it is also unable to record user activity correctly. If such a user exploits the data or code from or transmissions to and from the device, the security team cannot correctly establish the source and nature of the attack. So the best practices to avoid insecure authentication is to carefully study the authentication scheme of the application and test it with binary attacks in offline mode to determine if it can be potentially exploited. The security team should check if the app is letting a post get command be executed to establish a connection with the server without an access token. So these kind of attacks can easily be replayed. A successful connection establishes vulnerabilities in the app, of course. So the developer should ensure that passwords and security keys are not stored locally on the mobile device. Such data is extremely prone to manipulation. M5 is about insufficient cryptography. As you know, data and mobile applications become vulnerable due to weak encryption, decryption processes, or infirmities in the algorithms that trigger encryption-decryption process. Hackers can gain physical access to the mobile device, spy on the network traffic, or use malicious applications in the device to access encrypted data. Using flaws in the encryption process, its aim is to decrypt data to its original form in order to steal it or encrypt it using an adversarial process and thus render it useless for the legitimate user. The insufficient cryptography risks are obviously stealing application and user data. The best practice is to always choose modern encryption algorithm to encrypt applications. The sixth vulnerability is the insecure authorization. Many people confuse the M4 with M6 risks since both of them are about user credentials. Authentication is different than authorization. Developers should keep in mind that insecure authorization involves the adversary taking advantage of vulnerabilities in the authorization process to log in as a legitimate user, unlike insecure authentication in which the adversary tries to bypass the authentication process by logging in as an anonymous user. The risks are unregulated access to admin endpoints, and insecure direct object referencing or IDOR. The best practice to protect against this kind of attack is to continuously test user privileges by running low privilege session tokens for sensitive commands. The developers should also keep in mind that the user authorization scheme usually goes wrong in offline mode, so you have to test that as well. M7 is about poor code quality. The M7 risk emerges from poor or inconsistent coding practices, where each member of the development team follows a different coding practice and creates inconsistencies in the final code, or does not create enough documentation for others to follow. The risks can be compromised mobile applications, outdated or vulnerable third-party libraries, insecure client input, etc. So the best practice to avoid poor coding quality is to perform static analysis for the code, is to review the code logic, and to rewrite the code of the mobile device if the code was poorly written. M8 is about code tampering, in where hackers prefer code tampering of applications over other forms of manipulation, as it allows them to gain unbridled access to the application, the user behavior, or even the whole mobile device. Hackers tend to push users to download tampered versions of popular apps on various platforms, from third-party stores, etc., through phishing and social engineering attacks, using different techniques such as misleading advertisements. The risks are malware infusion, data theft, Meanwhile, the best practice to protect against this kind of attack is to use checksum changes and having the ability to erase the data. So you can develop your application in a way that it ensures that the application code, keys, and data are erased once tampering has been detected. Such a provision will destroy the very rationale of tampering and discourage hackers from targeting the same application again. M9 is about reverse engineering, in where the reverse engineering of mobile code is a commonly exploitable occurrence. Hackers tend to use external, commonly available binary inspection tools like IDA Pro, Hopper, etc. to study the original application's code pattern and its links with server processes. The risks are dynamic inspection at runtime. So some languages such as Objective-C, Swift are more susceptible to reverse engineering than others, as they allow dynamic inspection at runtime. Among other damages, reverse engineered code can impact the security of servers, data contained in mobile devices, and the server's ability to detect jailbroken or rooted devices. The other risk is code stealing. Reverse engineering can be used by application competitors to steal the application's functionalities, etc. The best way to secure an app against reverse engineering is to use the same tools that the hackers use to attempt to reverse engineer. If these tools can easily analyze the application's string tables, control flow, interaction with the server, the code is or can be compromised. So developers can also use a tool like app stealing to detect attempts at reverse engineering in real time. This is one of the approaches. The other approach is actually to use code obfuscation, which is a process that entails targeting specific segments of the source code, like string tables and methods that least impact code performance. The level of obfuscation employed should not be easily compromised. You can use obfuscation tools such as IDA Pro. You can also consider using C languages like C, C++, which can help in runtime manipulation to a great extent. Many libraries of these two languages easily integrate with Objective-C. The last one on the list here is extraneous functionality. So before an application is ready for production, the development team often keeps code in it to have easy access to the backend servers, create logs to analyze errors, or carry staging informations and testing details. This code is extraneous to the functioning of the application, i.e., it has no use for the intended user once the app is in production and is required only during the development cycle. In most cases, a benign code offers no extra advantage to an adversary who gains access. However, in certain cases, this code can carry information related to database, user details, and permissions. The best practice is to ensure that no test code is present in the final build.